Hi scary lovers. Today we're ready for part 4 already. Do you know what is going to happen? Please like and subscribe if you're into scary stories like me. The zombie staggered into the cabin, its ragged clothes hanging off its decaying frame. The stench of death filled the air as it lunged forward, and the group sprang into action. Get back! Tom shouted, swinging his weapon with force. He connected with the creature's head, sending it crashing to the floor. But more were outside, drawn by the commotion. Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline as she grabbed a heavy chair and positioned herself defensively. We have to block the door, she yelled. Mark moved swiftly, shoving the chair against the door just as another zombie pushed against it from the outside, teeth gnashing. The door groaned under the pressure. Keep it steady, Sarah urged, pressing her back against the chair to help hold it in place. Claire and Lucy quickly found another chair, adding their strength to reinforce the barricade. We can't let them in, Claire shouted, her eyes wide with fear. Quick! Find anything we can use as weapons, Tom ordered, scanning the cabin for anything they could grab. As they searched, the zombies outside began to pound on the door, the sound echoing like thunder. The wood creaked ominously, threatening to give way at any moment. Found a broom, Jake called, brandishing the long handle like a spear. And a kitchen knife. Good, Sarah said, her heart racing. We need all the weapons we can get. Just then, the door splintered, and the first crack appeared as another zombie pushed its way through. The chair began to slide. Hold it, Mark shouted, gripping the handle tighter. With a collective effort, they shoved against the door. One more push, Sarah yelled, her voice filled with determination. With a final heave, they managed to force the door back, but it was clear they couldn't hold it for long. The relentless pounding continued, more zombies joining the fray outside. Let's move to the back, Tom shouted, gesturing toward a small window. We can escape through there. They rushed to the back of the cabin, Sarah leading the way. We'll have to climb out quickly, she said, looking through the dusty glass. Outside, the forest loomed dark and foreboding, but it was their only chance. The sounds of growling intensified as more zombies gathered. Come on, hurry, Sarah urged, helping Claire and Lucy through the window first. Once they were out, she glanced back. Mark and Jake were holding the door, struggling to keep it shut. We've got to go, she yelled. Just a second. Mark grunted, trying to brace himself against the door. With a final push, the zombies broke through, flooding into the cabin. Now, Sarah shouted. Mark and Jake dove out just as the first zombies poured into the room. They hit the ground and rolled to their feet, adrenaline pumping. Run! Tom yelled, leading the charge into the trees. They sprinted into the woods, branches scratching at their arms and faces as they moved as fast as they could. The sounds of the undead echoed behind them, but they didn't dare look back. Which way? Claire panted, glancing around desperately. Just keep going straight, Sarah shouted, trying to remember the path they had taken earlier. They pushed deeper into the forest, their lungs burning, until they finally reached a small ridge. Out of breath, they paused to catch their bearings, their hearts racing. Are they following us? Jake asked, eyes wide with fear. I don't know, Tom replied, panting heavily, but we need to find somewhere to hide. As they stood in the darkness, a distant growl echoed through the trees. The threat was still there, lurking just out of sight. Over there, Lucy pointed to a cluster of boulders. We can hide behind those. They scrambled to the rocks and crouched low, listening intently. The sounds of the forest surrounded them. Crickets chirping, leaves rustling. But the moans of the zombies were growing fainter. We should rest for a moment, Sarah said, trying to steady her breathing. We can't keep running forever. As they huddled together, they exchanged worried glances. What do we do now? Claire asked, her voice shaky. We need a plan, Mark said. We can't just keep running blindly. Agreed, Sarah said, trying to gather her thoughts. We need to find a safe place to regroup. There might be other survivors nearby or a way out of these woods. Let's find a high point, Tom suggested. We can scout for a better location. Good idea, Sarah replied. But we need to stay quiet and move carefully. They waited a few more minutes, listening for any signs of danger. When the sounds of moaning faded completely, they cautiously made their way back into the woods, navigating by the dim light of the moon filtering through the leaves. As they climbed higher, the trees began to thin, revealing a slight slope that led to another ridge. Reaching the top, they found a small clearing that offered a view of the surrounding area. Look, Jake pointed ahead. There's a road. In the distance, a narrow dirt road wound through the trees, leading toward what appeared to be a cluster of lights, a town or settlement. Do you think it's safe? Lucy asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. There's a chance, Sarah said, squinting into the darkness. It's worth checking out. We can't stay here forever. Let's move cautiously, Tom said. If there are zombies, we need to be prepared. They descended the slope, sticking to the trees for cover. The closer they got to the road, the more they could see. Lights flickering and shadows moving in the distance. As they reached the edge of the clearing, they halted, watching the scene unfold. A few figures were moving around, and the glow of a fire illuminated the area. Are those people? Claire asked, her heart racing with hope. Looks like it, Mark replied, squinting. But we should approach carefully. We don't know if they're friendly. As they crept closer, they realized that the figures were indeed survivors, gathered around a fire, their expressions weary but alert. Let's go, Sarah said, her resolve strengthening. We need to introduce ourselves. With hearts pounding, they stepped out of the shadows, hands raised to show they meant no harm. Hello, Sarah called out, her voice steady but filled with anxiety. We're survivors. We need help. The figures turned, eyes wide with surprise. A moment of tension hung in the air as they sized each other up. Then one of the men stepped forward, a cautious smile breaking through. You're not alone. Come on over. We've got space by the fire. Relief washed over them as they made their way toward the camp, stepping into the light. They had found refuge, a place to catch their breath, and perhaps a chance to survive the night. As they settled in, exchanging stories of their harrowing experiences, Sarah felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. They were not done yet. There was still a fight ahead, but together, they might just stand a chance. As Sarah and the group approached the fire, they could see the faces of the other survivors. Tired but alive, a mix of hope and fear reflected in their eyes. The camp was small but organized, with makeshift tents set up around the flickering flames. Welcome, the man who had stepped forward said, extending a hand. I'm David. We're glad to see more survivors. Sarah, she replied, shaking his hand. This is Tom, Claire, Jake, Lucy, Mia, and Mark. We've just come from a camp that was overrun. We lost a few good people, but are happy to find other survivors. The group gathered closer to the fire, and Sarah felt warmth spread through her, both from the flames and the company. They settled down on the ground, the heat easing some of the tension in their bodies. Tell us what happened, David urged, looking at each of them intently, as Sarah recounted their harrowing night. Escaping the gas station, the containment breach, the chaos at the cabin, and their frantic flight through the woods. The others listened closely, nodding in understanding. Zombies are getting bolder. Another survivor, a woman named Eliza, said grimly. Our camp was attacked and we also lost a few good people. We've been on the move since. Have you seen any signs of a safe haven? Tom asked, his brow furrowing. We need somewhere we can regroup and plan. There's a fortified church a few miles from here, David said, glancing at the others for confirmation. We haven't gone that way, but it's rumored to be safe. They've set up defenses and have been taking in survivors. How do we get there? Jake asked, hope glimmering in his eyes. If we leave at first light, we can take the back roads and avoid the main highways. It'll be safer, Eliza suggested. But we need to be careful. The undead are everywhere. As they discussed their next move, a sudden rustling from the nearby trees made everyone tense. What was that? Lucy whispered, her eyes darting toward the darkness. David motioned for silence, and they all turned to listen. The rustling grew louder, then stopped abruptly. A sense of dread hung in the air. Probably just animals, Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. Stay alert, David replied, his expression serious. We need to make sure the perimeter is secure. Eliza, gather a few people to help. Eliza nodded and rallied a couple of the others, disappearing into the shadows to check the surroundings. Meanwhile, Sarah and her group exchanged worried glances. What if it's more zombies? Claire asked, her voice shaky. What if they find us here? We'll handle it, Tom assured her. We're not alone anymore. We can fight back. Just then, Eliza returned, her face pale. There are a few zombies out there, but they seem distracted. We need to be careful. Let's set up a watch, David said, taking charge. We'll rotate throughout the night. Sarah, can you take first watch with me? Of course, she replied, grateful for the responsibility. The group settled into their positions, with some laying down to rest while others kept their eyes on the dark woods. As the fire crackled, Sarah felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She had made it this far, and she wasn't going to let fear take over. Hours passed slowly, the night filled with the occasional sound of distant groans and rustling. Sarah and David sat quietly, scanning the trees for any movement. Have you been in this area long? She asked, trying to break the silence. Just for a week, he replied. We thought we could ride it out in the woods, but the zombies are relentless. We keep moving every day. Do you think the church is really safe? Sarah asked, doubt creeping into her mind. I hope so, he said, looking into the fire. But we have to try. It's our best shot at finding shelter and maybe regrouping with other survivors. Just then, a sharp scream pierced the night, sending chills down Sarah's spine. It was coming from the direction of the perimeter. Let's go, David shouted, springing to his feet. They rushed toward the sound, adrenaline surging. As they neared the edge of the camp, they saw Eliza struggling against a zombie, her makeshift weapon clattering to the ground. Get it off her, Sarah shouted, her heart pounding as she lunged forward. Tom was right beside her, swinging his bat and hitting the zombie squarely in the side of the head. The creature stumbled, giving Eliza a moment to break free. Are you okay? David called as he pulled her away. I'm fine, Eliza gasped, fear etched on her face. But there are more coming. Panic rippled through the camp as more zombies emerged from the shadows, their moans echoing in the night. Get to the fire. We can hold them off there, David shouted. They all scrambled back, forming a defensive line around the fire. Sarah grabbed a branch, ready to fight as the zombies closed in, their hungry eyes glinting in the firelight. Stay together, Tom yelled, his voice steady despite the chaos. As the first zombie lunged, Sarah swung her branch with all her might, striking it down. The creature fell, but more were already pushing through the darkness. The group fought bravely, swinging weapons and shouting commands. Eliza and Claire worked together, using a broken chair leg to fend off the undead, while Mark and Jake took on another side, battling fiercely. Just as it seemed they were gaining the upper hand, a loud crash echoed from the woods. A tree had fallen, the sound of splintering would reverberating in the air. More are coming, David warned, scanning the darkness. We need to retreat to the cabin. Are you sure? Sarah questioned, her heart racing. What if it's overrun? It's our best chance. We need to regroup, David urged, determination flashing in his eyes. With no other option, they began to fall back, covering each other as they moved. The zombies were relentless, but they fought their way through the crowd, pushing back with every ounce of strength they had. Finally, they reached the cabin, slamming the door shut behind them. Breathing heavily, they barricaded it with furniture, their hearts pounding in unison. Is everyone okay? Sarah asked, scanning the group. I think so, Mark said, his face flushed. But we can't stay here long. They'll break through. We need to find a way out, Tom said, urgency in his voice. There must be another exit. David moved toward a small window at the back of the cabin. We can escape through here, but it'll be tight. We have to be quick. Let's go, Sarah said, adrenaline surging once more. We can't let them trap us. One by one, they squeezed through the window, moving swiftly to stay out of sight. As they landed on the ground, they could hear the faint sound of zombies banging on the cabin door. We need to make a break for the road, David whispered, leading the way into the trees. They darted into the woods, sticking to the shadows, and ran as quietly as they could, the sounds of the undead fading behind them. Keep going, Tom urged, glancing back at the cabin as they moved further into the forest. We'll find the road. After what felt like an eternity of running, they finally reached the dirt road. The moonlight illuminated their path, and they paused to catch their breath. We made it, Sarah said, panting heavily. For now, David replied, looking down the road. But we have to keep moving. The church is still our best option. As they began walking along the road, a sense of unity washed over them. They were alive, together, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. This night was almost over, but the fight was far from done. With each step, they were one step closer to finding safety and hope. As dawn broke, the first light of morning spilled over the horizon, illuminating the dense forest. They had made it to another day. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, offering a stark contrast to the darkness they had fled the night before. The group walked along the dirt road, fatigue settling in their bones, but hope flickered within them. They had survived the night and were moving toward what they hoped would be safety. Let's take a moment to rest, Sarah suggested, glancing back at her friends. We need to gather our strength for the day ahead. They found a small clearing just off the road, shaded by towering trees. The air was crisp and cool, and the sounds of morning began to fill the forest. Birds chirping, leaves rustling gently in the breeze. As they settled on the ground, Sarah pulled out the can of food they had salvaged from the cabin. I know it's not much, but it'll help. The others nodded, grateful for anything to eat. They shared the small meal, the tension of the previous night beginning to ease. Do you think we'll find the church today? Claire asked, her voice still tinged with worry. I hope so, Tom replied, finishing his bite. If it's as fortified as David said, it might be our best chance. Mark looked around, surveying the landscape. We need to be cautious. Even during the day, there could be stragglers out here. After they finished eating, David stood up and stretched. We should set out soon. The sooner we get there, the better. As they prepared to leave, Sarah felt a sense of determination settle over her. They had faced the darkness together, and they could continue to do so. They resumed their journey down the road, the sunlight breaking through the treetops, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The atmosphere felt lighter, and for the first time in days, they allowed themselves to breathe a little easier. Look, Lucy pointed ahead, her eyes wide with excitement. I see something up there. As they drew closer, the outline of a structure began to take shape, a large building with a steeple reaching toward the sky. It's the church, David exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. We made it. With renewed energy, they quickened their pace, the weight of their previous fears lifting as they approached the building. But as they got closer, a sense of unease crept back in. The church looked weathered, its doors hanging slightly ajar, and there were no signs of life around. Do you think anyone is here? Claire asked, her voice cautious. Let's find out, Tom said, stepping forward. He pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly in the still air. Inside, the church was dimly lit, dust motes floating in the beams of light streaming through stained glass windows. The pews were scattered, and the altar showed signs of disarray, but there were no immediate threats in sight. Hello, David called out, his voice echoing in the silence. Is anyone here? After a tense moment, a figure stepped out from behind the altar. An older man with a long beard and tired eyes appeared, holding a makeshift weapon, a heavy piece of wood. Who are you? The man asked, narrowing his gaze. What do you want? We're survivors, Sarah said. stepping forward cautiously. We heard this place was safe. We're hoping to find refuge. The man studied them closely, assessing their sincerity. You're not the first to seek shelter here. Many have come and gone. Is it safe? Mark asked, glancing at the door behind them. We've just come from a camp that was overrun. We need a place to regroup. The man hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly. For now it's safe, but we can't be too careful. You'll need to earn your keep if you want to stay. What do you need? David asked, stepping forward. Help securing the perimeter and gathering supplies. We've had a few close calls, the man replied. My name is Eli, and I've been holding this place together as best I can. Then we'll help, Sarah said, her voice steady. We're in this together. Eli nodded, and they quickly set to work, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They began fortifying the doors and windows, using whatever materials they could find. As they worked, the group shared their stories, building camaraderie with Eli and a few other survivors who had taken refuge in the church. The tasks kept their minds occupied, and for the first time in days, laughter echoed through the halls, mingling with the morning light. By midday, they had made significant progress. Eli showed them around the church, revealing hidden supplies and a small kitchen stocked with canned goods. Here, you'll need this, he said, handing Sarah a flashlight. Power is limited, but we can make it work. Thank you, she said, feeling a sense of gratitude swell in her chest. After the work was done, they gathered around the small kitchen table to discuss their next steps. We need a plan, David said, looking around at everyone. We can't stay holed up here forever. We should scout the area for more supplies and potential threats. Agreed, Tom added. We need to know what we're up against. Let's split into teams, Eli suggested. One group can search for food and supplies, while another can scout the perimeter for any signs of trouble. Sarah felt a sense of determination fill her. I'll go with whoever is searching for supplies. We can't risk running low again. I'll join you, Claire said, her confidence growing. I'll go too, Mark offered, stepping forward. Great. The rest of you can help secure the perimeter, David said, organizing the groups. They made their plans, and as the sun began to dip in the sky, they set out, each group filled with purpose. Sarah felt a surge of hope as they stepped outside. They were alive, they were together, and safe for now. As they moved through the surrounding woods, the shadows began to stretch, but the promise of a new day fueled their resolve. Together, they would carve out their survival in this new, unforgiving world. I hope you enjoyed today's part of the story. What do you think will happen next? Let me know down below how you think the next part will go. And please like and subscribe if you're into scary stories like me and would like to help me grow, so I can make better content for all of you. Stay safe and you'll hear me tomorrow.